And one of the things that happens as believers is we look at these heroes of the faith, and Abraham's definitely a hero of the faith. His faith is credited to him as righteousness. He's the nation of Israel later on. He is the one that God says all of us will be blessed through, and we are through the lineage of Jesus. And we are all part of his family. That's why we can sing that Father Abraham song, because it's not about being a blood relative. It's about being a faith relative. And so Abraham's kind of set up and put in this place for us to look up to and reflect on and everything else, which is great until you live your life of faith and you're like, well, I'm not an Abraham. I'm not a Moses. I'm not a Paul. I'm not any of those really strong, firm believers. And sometimes we overestimate how all of their goodness and positive qualities and attributes, and sometimes we minimize their weaknesses and failures and all of that. And so in our own personal faith walk, we hit problems head on and are crushed by it. What happens when you fail? Does God still love you? What if you don't do it exactly right? And you put so much pressure on your decisions that you're afraid to move? What if you're faced with these trials that you can't overcome even with the help of God? What if you're just, having a blah day and don't feel like it? What if? What happens? What happens to those kinds of things? See, what I don't want us to do is overestimate all these positive attributes of Abram or Abraham. And underestimate the fact that he was a man just like us. And that he failed at times, that he deliberately misled, lied, and did things against God's word and God's ways. He deliberately did those things too, just like us. So when we look at Abraham, I think one of the things that I want us to capture as we're talking about how can we grow in this faith is that Abraham's faith was just like the rest of us. And our faith is just like the rest of us. Like, we don't do this perfectly. We don't walk perfectly. And when we don't, in my life, I've always been afraid of God's wrath. You didn't do it right, Graham. You deserve this. Or God's punishment. Or, not getting what I think God would want for me as his child. And so it can be really disrupting and concerning. And it creates a dilemma of faith in our lives. So today we're going to look at what happens when Abraham's got faith, just like the rest of us. It's not perfect. And so verse 10, we're going to pick up and read. So there's a famine in the land. What land? Where?
Negev.
Yes, Negev, the promised land. There's a famine in the promised land. God shows up to Abraham and says, follow me, leave all of your family, all of your friends, all of your everything that you know. Follow me, I'm going to lead you into this great land. I'm going to make you a great. Remember, this is just a few verses before, guys. Like, we're in verse 10 here. So the first 9 verses are the promises and God saying, follow me, follow me, follow me. And remember, I'm going to bless the socks off of you so that you can be a blessing. Follow me. And then Abraham's like, I'm in. And he goes. And the next verse says, God led him straight into a famine. Not what you expected, is it? I had a friend this week challenge me in the exact same way. He's like, Graham, what are you thinking about? Like you expect that once you follow God, everything's going to be great. And he's giving me this vision and this idea of what church is going to look like. And he's given us this incredible house to meet in. And then Sunday after Sunday after Sunday, like my expectations here is that it grows and grows. And people come because, man, our God is awesome. And we love serving him and learning from him and all of this. So music is fantastic. Our children's ministry is rocking. Like, all of these things are very, very, very good. Why aren't we growing? He's like, let me ask you a question. Wait, that's what he says. I'm going to ask you a question because I'm like, oh, here it comes. He says, do you think Abraham's expectations were much different than how it happened for Abraham? Yeah. Don, I know his name. Don, I do. You think Moses' expectations were very different than what Moses experienced? God says, no, you're going to lead my people out of Egypt. And Moses is like, okay. I mean, it's 3 days from here to there. If we go straight through, how long did it really take them to get to the promised land? 40 years! Do you think Moses' expectations were, oh, it's going to take 40 years to go 3 days worth of... No. See, here's what I want you to see in that. Jesus is calling the disciples, follow me, follow me, follow me, follow me. Like, yeah, we're in. This is cool, it's exciting. And then he's crucified. And for 3 days, they're like, not what I expected. Right? In all of our lives, guys. Faith like the rest of us. The rest of us are these great, great pillars of faith. And guess what? Their expectations were not at all what they experienced either. Abraham's in the promised land. And the first verse of him arriving there is now there was a famine in the land. We don't know how long it was there before the famine happened, but wouldn't you expect that God's going to provide for him at that point? And instead, what happens is he questions God and says, God, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? And we don't really know what those conversations look like, but I guarantee you that there was some time spent asking God to tell him. And there's no indication that God did. And so guess what he does? So Abraham went down to Egypt to live there for a while because the famine was severe. Egypt has a really big part to play in the Bible. We're going to talk about that here in just a little bit, okay? Famine was severe. Severe is adding intensity to it. It wasn't just a little bit of famine. They weren't just worried about a couple of days. It was severe. He was worried that going into the promised land, his family was going to starve to death. Talk about questioning God at that point. Verse 11. As he was about to enter Egypt, he said to his wife Sarai, I know what a beautiful woman you are. And when the Egyptians see you, they will say, this is my wife. Oops, this is his wife. Then they will kill me, but will let you live. Say, you are my sister, so that I will be treated well for your sake, and my life will be spared because of you. And he was right. When Abraham came to Egypt, the Egyptians saw that Sarai was a beautiful woman. So here's what we need to know about this. Sarai, her name is changed too. So I'm probably going to intermingle those names like it's the same person. And it is about 65 to 75 years old. And what is Abraham worried about?
She's so beautiful.
She's still beautiful. At 65, 75 years old, this is what every woman that I've met wants to be. At 75 years old, you don't want to have wrinkles, you don't want to, you want to still be a head turner, right? For whatever reason that is, I'm not arguing that. I'm just saying, she was beautiful. And at 60 to 70 years old, extremely beautiful, and Abraham knew it. And so he says, while we are in Egypt, I want you to tell everybody that you're my sister. Yeah, sister. Ooh, right? That's a little bit weird, isn't it? A little bit weird. But here's what Abraham was counting on. He was counting on the fact that if he went into a foreign country with his wife as his sister, then instead of being in danger of death, because what's the easiest way? King David taught us this principle, right? You want to marry a woman that's not your wife, what do? Kill her husband. And so he's going into a foreign country with a beautiful wife. He's like, yikes, how's this going to work? So I don't want to die. Instead, tell him you're my brother. Now, here's what helps us contextually with this. As her brother, he would be negotiated with for her to become someone's bride. So a man that might be interested in Sarai would come to him and say, I'll give you 27 camels, 3 weeks of barley, and a partridge in a pear tree. I don't know. And so he would have this opportunity to barter a bride's price for his wife, sister, and that would give him some time. So he could at some point go yeah, this is getting too dangerous, let's get out of here, and escape. That was his plan. And the plan was going to work for him, providing that everything went according to plan. Right? And here's the other thing, this is a deception, but it's not a complete untruth. Because what we find out in a previous, or in a chapter down the way, is that she really is his half-sister. Different mom, different situation, I don't know all of the details, we'll find out when we do that chapter. But she really is his half-sister. So it's not a complete misleading, It's just big enough to keep Abraham safe. Okay, so in 3 verses, we've learned his family's in danger of starving. They go to Egypt, and he tells everybody that Sarai is his sister, not his wife. You can't get any better than this, right? I mean, this is like full of intrigue and suspense and excitement. So, when he comes to Egypt, the Egyptians saw that Sarai was a very beautiful woman. He's like, hey, it's working, right? It's working. And then when Pharaoh's officials saw her, they praised her to Pharaoh. And she was taken into his palace. Wah, wah, wah. Didn't expect that, did you, Abram? That's not planned. That's not planned. And when Pharaoh's officials saw her, they praised her to Pharaoh, and she was taken into his palace, and he treated Abraham well for her sake. And Abraham acquired sheep and cattle, male and female donkeys, male and female servants, and camels. Stop. This plan of Abram's was going to work great if it was a normal suitor coming after his wife. What he didn't anticipate was that Pharaoh would be like, hey, she's beautiful. Bring her to me. Because pharaohs don't have to negotiate bride prices with anybody. No rules apply to them about who they take and who they don't take. So now Abraham's stuck. He's like, what am I gonna do? And Pharaoh's taken Sarai, his wife, into Pharaoh's harem. Now, the commentators that I read don't think that anything happened to Sarai, and we'll find out why here in just a second, but Abram's got big problems, doesn't he? Now, one of the things that's going to come back into the storyline of Abram, is that he acquired sheep, cattle, male and female donkeys, male and female servants, and camels. Next week we're going to talk a little bit more about what happens here, and know that the rest of Abram's life there are issues because of everything that he gathered in Egypt and took out. So all of the blessings that he received in Egypt were kind of this cutting edge thing. Next week, we'll see there's not enough land to support everything that he had and his nephew Lot. One of the servants that came along was Hagar, and we're going to see later on that creates problems too. And so Egypt is this representative place, like I told you we're going to talk more about. And everything that he brought out of Egypt, it wasn't super helpful. It actually created more problems for him. Okay, so now Abram's got this dilemma. He's acquiring all of this bride price for his bride because she's in Pharaoh's harem. I'm having a hard time saying Pharaoh's harem. Turn to the person next to you and say Pharaoh's harem, and you'll see what I mean. Not so easy. But God. But God. Look, is Abraham making wise choices so far? He's leaving the promised land, going to Egypt, deceiving the Egyptians about who his wife is. She winds up in danger. But God inflicts serious diseases on Pharaoh and his household because of Abram's wife Sarai. Next verse. Pharaoh somehow figures out why. All of a sudden everybody in his courts are like suffering with miserable illnesses and diseases because of this woman. And he summons Abram. What have you done to me? He said. Why didn't you tell me she was your wife? Why did you say she's my sister so that I took her to be my wife? Now then, here's your wife. Take her and go. Get out. Then Pharaoh gave orders about Abram to his men. They sent him on his way with his wife and everything he had. Boy, being sent out of Egypt with everything that you had acquired in Egypt and then some, what does that remind you of? Absolutely. This is like happening generations before. But isn't it interesting that every time God is showing Egypt there's people leaving and they're taking all of this stuff, but they're leaving under really interesting situations. Okay, let's go back here. What have you done to me? Isn't it interesting that Abram, this man of God, is being called out by somebody that doesn't believe in the same God? Isn't that embarrassing? When the rest of the world has more morals and scruples and integrities than believers do? It's embarrassing, isn't it? And yet, Abraham is credited as being this man of great faith. Not living up to that at this point, clearly. But he's still protected and watched over by God. Remember, God said in the first 10 verses, I will, I will, I will. And by the way, I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you. And you will be a blessing. I will make you a blessing. And you will be blessed. So I don't feel like Pharaoh's cursing Abraham at this point, but God's definitely watching out for him and protecting him. And I don't think at all that we need to take this any further than it needs to be taken in terms of, well, we can just go and do whatever we want to, and God's going to take care of the rest. But I will tell you this, when we're striving to be men and women of faith, and it's not going the way that we'd hoped that it was going, know this, but God. God fights for you. God's a strong God. God is with you. He's your safe place to run. He is your protector. He is your provider. He has pledged himself to you, and he's going through this life with you. He can override all that we do wrong for his benefit. But it doesn't make it okay for us to do what we want to do. Okay? Now, I told you we were going to talk a little bit more about what Egypt stands for and all of that. But before we do, I just want to take her and go. I want to end with that because next week we pick up right after this. Take her and go. So he gathers everything and they leave. But now he's been blessed beyond anything that he expected by Pharaoh because he's got all these camels and people and all of that to go with him. So they send him on his way and they let him take everything that he could. But Abraham's faced with a dilemma. And I told you in the beginning, we don't want to overestimate these men and women of faith that we read about because they have faith just like the rest of us. And we too, at times, are going to be faced with dilemmas. We're going to experience tests and trials too in our lives. You can't escape it because the world is broken. You're broken because of sin. And we're waiting for God to come back and redeem it, but there's things that are acting against us in ways that we don't even see or recognize because it's not just a human physical battle, it's also spiritual. All right? So those are the three reasons why things don't go always as we have planned. Plus, God is always trying to teach us and test us and help us develop stronger faith. That's one of his goals. All right? So the dilemmas that Abraham encountered are no different than the dilemmas that you may encounter in your own faith walk. What are those? They're listed for you, so you can just read ahead if you want to. But have you ever found yourself with no clear answers from God? You're praying and praying and praying about something. You're asking him to show up. You don't know what to do, and you're like right or left, like red or blue. Like, what do I do here, God? And he's quiet. That's a dilemma for me, oftentimes. I don't want to wait on him. I want the answer now. And I want to know that I'm doing it right now. And sometimes it's like, I just want to spend more time with you. And the answer will become clear eventually. Do you trust me? Do you trust me? Sometimes we're disappointed or disillusioned because what we felt like we've heard from God is not the way our lives are working out with God. I admit it and confess to you, I feel that all the time. I feel that all the time. And my buddy's like, why do you think you're any different than them? I feel like I'm a lot different than Abraham. Put him up on a pretty high pedestal. But again, he had faith just like the rest of us. What about no food? Could you imagine? God leads you someplace that's full of scarcity instead of plenty. would that create a dilemma for you? Are you content with just God alone? Can't find a solution? You're not getting direction? You naturally start to ask those last two questions. Has God forsaken us? Has He abandoned us? Where is He right now? Have I done something so wrong that He will never step back in and rescue me? What is happening? What is happening? And I'm sure, just so you know, that Abraham is asking those exact same questions that you may be asking right now in a situation in your own life. So what do we do with that? Well, I told you we were going to take a look at what Egypt represents and what Canaan represents. And I've got a graphic that will help us determine those things. The difference between Egypt and Canaan helps us understand what we're trusting in. Because Egypt, even though it's a geographical location that we can still find on our maps today versus some of the ones in Canaan that we can't, Egypt represents things in the Bible. It represents the world's wisdom. It represents the enticements of the world. It represents the health, wealth, and prosperous types of ideas and mindsets. The world tries to sell us in bucket loads. Egypt had all of those things. If you're an Egyptian, you had this great stuff. I mean, they were a very advanced civilization for their time, and they enjoyed a lot of benefits and blessings from where they were in the region and how they kind of organized their civilization. And it represents the world. So anytime you read Egypt in our Bibles, the first thing you can do is consider, is God using Egypt as a representation of the world, or is it something else? Because there are times when it's other things. It can represent self-confidence. It can represent bondage. Okay, God used Egypt to discipline His nation, Israel, because they were not following Him. And He's like, okay, if you're not going to follow me, I'm going to provide a strong kingdom to come in and discipline you for this. Remember, it starts out as protection and families and things, but it ends up being, when they start to live in it, a difficult place, a bad place. It's a place where they start to doubt and abandon God because everything that Egypt offers looks more attractive and appealing than biblical things. So we've got Egypt on one side, and we've got Canaan, the promised land, on the other side. The promised land represents everything opposite of that, right? It represents God's faithfulness to His people, God's provision, God's pledge, saying, I'm going to bring you in, and I'm going to prop you up, and I'm going to show you off, and I'm going to bless you so that you can show the rest of the world my blessings. It represents victory, because eventually the promised land that we read about in the Bible will become the promised land of eternity, which is heaven, a land flowing with milk and honey, a land lit by God's very presence, where there is no pain, there is no suffering, there is no more difficulty. That's the ultimate Canaan. But that's where God provides for us in everything, and it's truly an incredible blessing. So that's what they represent. But we're going to have to take a look at, what does it mean to me? What does it mean that there's an Egypt and a Canaan in my life? When I'm faced with a dilemma, with a faith-testing dilemma, what do I do? Do I turn towards Egypt, or do I turn towards Canaan? Because when I turn to Egypt, I'm turning to my self-interest, my self-centeredness, all of the things that I think, I'm going to resolve this problem right now. I know how to do this. God's abandoned me, so I'm just going to take care of this. I'm going to solve it right now. I made a couple of notes. I said, investing in the world and trusting ourselves is what our Egypts are. Well, I'm going to go find some worldly answers. This is one of the things that scares the crud out of me when it comes to counseling. When we encounter something emotionally difficult, or when something's happening in our minds or our spirits, and we turn to the world's counseling instead of to godly counseling, they're going to feed you everything from Egypt. They're not feeding you things from the promised land. So investing in that kind of thing is going to take you down a path that you don't want to go down. And normally, and we see this too in what happened with Abraham, is he decides and goes towards Egypt, and then what's the very next thing that happens? He He lies. See, spending time here means that you probably are going to have to stretch something to make it really work for you. Because it's not a land of truth. And usually, hanging out in Egypt causes more deception. It causes more difficulties for you. It causes more trouble. I mean, I don't know what would have happened if Abraham stayed in the land of Canaan. I promise you that God wasn't going to let him die there. Promise you. Why? Because God made promises to him. I'm going to make you into a great nation. I'm going to grow your family. I'm going to be with you in the midst of all of this. And all Abraham had to do was be like, I'm going to sit right here in Canaan because I know God's not going to let me starve, and I'm going to see what he does. You're going to see what he does, but he didn't. He left. Had he stayed in Canaan, we would have seen that faith would have shown up in incredible ways, that God's promises were going to come true, that God would deliver him and provide for him in Canaan from starvation, rather than have to deliver him and provide for him out of Egypt. We would have seen that God is justifying him all along in Canaan. We would have seen that God is calling this unholy, incapable person to follow him, and God's revealing himself to him, and we would have gone, hey, I want some of that, and God says, absolutely, you can have it. That's the promise. None of us deserve God's blessing, not even Abraham, but yet God blesses him. And it forces us to ask, why me, God? Why are you doing all of these things for me? Why do you love me like that? Why do you provide? Why do you promise me these things? Because I certainly don't deserve it. God says, because I love you. And here's what I want you to see. We're living in Egypt when we stop trusting God's word and God's promises, and that God's with us. And we start leaning on wisdom that comes from the world and not wisdom that comes from God. That's when we're living in Egypt. God says, I don't want you guys there. I've got so much better things for you. Don't turn back to the world's ways. I pulled you out of the world. I'm calling you out of the world. I'm calling you to be different, to reflect into the world all of the benefits of following me and having this deep faith and the blessings that I'm giving you. Don't spend any more time in your mind in the world. Get out of the world. Instead, when we live in Canaan, our failures should lead to greater faithfulness as we absorb and appreciate his great mercy and grace. See, we know that we fail at faith. I mean, I know that I fail at faith all the time. I know that I don't believe God at his word and at his promises. I know that there are times when I'm fighting for what I think I deserve. I know that in my relationships, I act towards other people like, if you hurt me, I'm going to hurt you right back. I know that I get afraid of what people are saying or telling me. I know that I react improperly, not with the fruit of the Spirit, when I'm confronted with different things. I know all of that. But when I know that, and I recognize that I want to live in God's promises where he says, I am protecting you. Let me. Don't fight your own battles. I am watching over you. Don't worry about what tomorrow brings. I've got it. Look around. The grass is here for a season and it goes away. The birds, don't worry about where they're finding their next meal from. I'm taking care of them. And if I call them by name, don't you think that I care more about you? He says, if you truly recognize that you're living in the promised land now, it changes everything about you. And as you appreciate that, your response to God is, oh, yes, Lord. More of that. More of that. I want to trust you more. I recognize that when I've failed and let you down, the best part about that is that you're going to pick me back up. I don't have to live in guilt or shame, but that you're watching out for me, you're watching over me, and you're bringing me along. And it leads to greater faith time I let God down, I appreciate more His mercy. I appreciate more His grace. I recognize more how much it cost Him to give it to me. Every time I let Him down, He lifts me back up and provides. Nice, right? And we can have that when we live in Canaan. We can't have that over here because when you're in Egypt, when you mess up, people let you know. You're not as good as them. You'll never be as good as them. They'll never forgive you. You don't deserve it. But over here, I know. I know. You're human. You're going to fail. And I love you anyway. And I'm here to lift you back up. And I'm here to help you. And be merciful and kind. Where do you want to live? A couple things as we close out that I want you to think about as we kind of wrap up and do our little thing here at the end. Don't forget the giving box. Don't forget the giving box and the family Bible and prayer request and communion in the back. And I'd love for you to spend time in this space, kind of just soaking in what these things allow us to interact with God on a real intimate level. I want you to see some things out of this account in Abraham's life. That God's faithfulness to us is always stronger than our faithfulness to Him. Always. And that's okay. He knows. He knows. When you're stronger, you help the weak, right? God's faithfulness to you is perfect. His loving kindness lasts for generations. He has pledged His love and affection and kindness and mercy and grace. He's pledged it. He's covenanted that with you. He says, no matter what you do, no matter what you think, no matter what you say, no matter how badly you fail, I will always love you. Unbreakable. Loving kindness. Unbreakable. His faithfulness to you is always greater than your faithfulness can be or will be to Him. Always. So then, our failures can lead to more guilt and shame or more appreciation of God's mercy and grace. Are you feeling guilty or ashamed about something right now? I mean, I think guilt is a good thing. I think guilt is what charges us to be like, ooh, this is not good, I got to figure out what to do with it. But when you live in Canaan, you go to the Father and you say, I trust your promises that you will forgive me for this and help me work on this issue in my life. I don't want to do it again. I agree with you that it's bad. And He says, yeah, okay, so let's do this together. That's the promise of Canaan. So is our guilt or is our shortcomings or are our failures leading you to feel more shamed? Because eventually we can get locked into this shame that creates legalism in our lives where everything's bad. And in order to avoid shame, I must. That's not what God says. That's not what Canaan's about. It's not about rules. It's about I will be your God and you will be my people. I will guide you and lead you in this, in relationship. And we get that opportunity when we live in Canaan to be forgiven, to be shown mercy and grace. And lastly, I just want to tell you that because of the nature of Canaan and the nature of God's love for us, no matter how bad we've behaved, no matter how far away we've walked, no matter what issues we've had to deal with in our lives, no matter how much of a failure we feel like our faith has been, God's all about new beginnings. All about it. Over and over and over and over again, He takes people and lifts them up and revives them and restores them and reinserts them in the promises that He's made to them. When Abraham gets back after all of this Egypt tomfoolery, he worships God again. He recommits himself to God and the promises that God made to him. And God doesn't say, oh, 3 strikes and you're out, buddy. He says, yeah, follow me. Follow me. Follow me. Let's pray.